right, guys, welcome to the GSB debate for Friley. I'm glad you all could make it. Just one piece of announcement. Down there is a What the Friley sheet, so you can get points for your house if you just go sign your name. Also, help yourself to the sandwiches. Just be discreet if you go and get it during the actual debate. This is a pretty good opportunity for us to learn a little bit about what the GSB is like, what issues are going to be up for voting, and hopefully you guys will leave a little bit more informed than you were before. So I think we're going to start with Daniel with our opening statement.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Feel free to take a minute or two if you'd like to do some extra last-minute things. Or
I think I'll probably just go with it.
all right.
So to begin, my name is Dan Radisky. I'm a junior in computer science and political science. And Zach, if you'd like to
Yeah, I'm Zach Bauer. I'm a sophomore in political science.
And so Zach and I are running for president and vice president of the government and student body because we think that GSB has a lot of potential. The government and student body is meant to represent and, well, one of the jobs it ends up doing is also funding student organizations, but primarily the executive is more geared towards getting projects done and representing students overall. So Zach and I think that GSB does that, but we think that we can do a better job. And so we've kind of outlined ways in which we think that GSB can serve students better. And we think that GSB can have a little bit more life in it. And we've dubbed our campaign CPR, communication, projects, and representation. We think that GSB needs to do a better job communicating because...
I don't know why that did that, sorry.
For the record, how much time are we getting for opening?
You have like 4 minutes.
Okay, fantastic. As I was saying, for communication, we think that GSB kind of really needs to work on this. To be honest, most people don't know what's going on within the GSB Senate in any given week or what a lot of the projects are. And this is something that GSB has been working on this year with an update to the website. But we think that GSB can go even further in making sure that students know what GSB is working on so that students can have input on it or that students can just understand where their student community is going. So those are a couple of the topics that we think are really important when it comes to communication. Projects are something you're always going to hear about when you go to campaign season, I guess, if you will. Projects are typically about 90% of what comes up during campaigns. So some of the projects that Zach and I are going to be working on include free e-textbooks for 100 and 200 level classes, investigating the use of mass email lists by Ames businesses such as Tornado Wash, and seeing whether that is on the same rate as a student organization who's just trying to diversify the student experience here at Iowa State is paying. You want to hit any of the others?
Yeah, and then the R obviously stands for representation, like Dan said. And in order for us to communicate better with students and to say represent them, is we need to make GSB more transparent to them. So like Dan mentioned, the website, there should be legislation on there, agendas, funding balances, those types of things. Because if we're not able to get student input, we're not able to represent our constituents to the fullest ability. And so other ways for that representation would be more open forums. GSB hosted Deck the Town Halls back in December with ISU administrators. And we had a pretty good turnout for the first one, but Dan and I would like to expand on those because GSB is kind of the communication between ISU administrators, state legislators, Board of Regents members, those types of things. So for us to fully do our job, we need to open those lines of communication in order to better represent the students of Iowa State.
And to even further that idea, I think with the town halls and with some of the things that GSB needs to do is almost step out of the way when it comes to communication. I think that we need to make opportunities for students to be able to voice their concerns directly to the people, because sometimes the best advocates of ideas isn't someone else, it's actually a student who comes up with the idea. So we think that those are all important parts of building a better GSB to serve students better. So that is, I guess, our campaign and our platform for this spring. So with that, thank you.
Okay. Lindsay?
Hi everybody, my name is Spencer Hughes. I'm a junior in communications and political science. I'm also a former Friley Chamberlain resident, room 4439, represent. And I'm candidate for president of the government of the student body.
Good evening, I'm Hillary Kletcher, and I'm a sophomore in biological systems engineering. So shout out to any engineers out there. And I'm running for vice president of the government of the student body. Spencer and I's campaign really focuses on putting students first. And when we say that, we mean that it's truly all about you and everything that we do. And when we say you, we don't always mean the word you, but the letter U. And Spencer and I will break that down into the different areas that we've divided our issues into for you.
So the first way that we're making it all about you is ensuring that students will be better understood. Now what we mean by that is GSB has difficulty making itself known to students because its internet presence is not out of the 21st century, and I'll just leave it at that. Part of the reason why students have difficulty knowing what's going on with GSB is because we don't post things on our website. We don't take full advantage of our social media presence like Facebook and Twitter, and that's the way that things are going. That's how people get information now. So Hillary and I will work as soon as we're elected to post every time GSB spends money on the front page of the website and make sure that we continue to grow our Facebook and Twitter presences, which I've worked to do over the course of this past year as well. Another way that will make students better understood is by working to pass the agenda of the Senate has been something that students have to wade through to be able to even speak at a GSB meeting. And that's something that Hillary and I worked to change earlier this year. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it through, but that's something that remains at one of the top of our priority list down the line. So that in the future, if you want to come to a GSB meeting and express the concerns that you do have, you'll be able to do so without having to wade through the procedural stuff that GSB has put before your opportunity to speak.
And just to add on to that about the agenda item, Spencer and I are excited that after having gone through Senate once, we've gotten some valuable feedback from fellow government of the student body senators and executives as well as students. So we think that when we go at it a second time, we can truly be successful with that effort. And then moving on into the second area is just continuing to make students unburdened. Spencer and I fully support a tuition freeze and any fee freeze as well as a decrease if at all possible. We really want to work with the Board of Regents to make sure that you're paying the least amount of money possible for your high quality education here at Iowa State. And along with that, there's other things that can add on to the money that you need to spend while you're getting your education. And those things are supplemental instruction materials. So we agree with Dan and Zach that e-textbooks are a fabulous idea and work towards that as well. And one project that I've been working on already is comparing two systems that both gather in-class input, so Top Hat Monocle and clickers. I'm sure many of you have used a clicker and maybe a few of you have used Top Hat Monocle. But the real difference is that currently Top Hat Monocle is funded by a grant, but when that grant disappears, students may have to purchase two systems that do the exact same thing. So just finding things like that within the university where students are spending more money than they need to throughout their time here at Iowa State. And finally, another thing we want to do to make students more unburdened is eliminate the free speech zone, because this is America and one of our rights is having free speech, and that shouldn't have to be defined as a zone here on our campus. It should really be welcome anywhere throughout our campus, and you should always feel comfortable as a student speaking your mind no matter where you are here at Iowa State.
The third way that Hillary and I want to make it all about you is by making GSB more united with the student body as a whole. And the reason that GSB isn't currently united is due to what are called the GSB executive payments. Now, as it stands right now, there are 3 positions in GSB that get paid from the same pool of money that all students pay through the activity fee. And these positions are the president, the vice president, and the finance director. They're eligible for all expenses paid for the summer, fall, and spring of their term for tuition and fees, room and board, and benefits, and it's adjusted for in-state and out-of-state. So an out-of-state student who is elected president is eligible for as much as $37,000 of payments from the activity fee that all students pay, just for serving in a student organization executive position for 1 year. This is something that I've always felt is wrong. That money can be better served by helping student organizations. That's what the money is there for. It's not right that every student pays extra so that 3 students can pay nothing.
That was nice.
It was perfect timing right at the end of this.
Yeah, perfect timing. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so thank you guys for your opening comments. Right now, we're going to open it up to questions from you guys. So this is really your opportunity to ask questions, ask what they're, ask them to clarify their positions that they've talked about in their opening statement. Ask them about other things you've read maybe in the Iowa State Daily or heard elsewhere. Ask about something that concerns you personally as a student, and get those questions answered. Yes.
Just a quick question. With regards to the free speech zone, do you understand that that's a protection for the students and that prevents, for example, Westboro Baptist from coming and picketing outside of the residence halls and things like that? And what would be the purpose of doing that and allowing campus, which is a private area, to be infiltrated?
Well, I understand your concern, and we're not advocating for a complete elimination of all the safeguards that are in place. But I do take issue with your characterization of this as a private area. This is a public institution, and the people of Iowa are the people who own this building and own every place that is on our campus. So I can understand.
This building is not open to anyone other than residents. It's a Department of Residence policy that all peoples must be escorted by a resident of the building at all times.
I absolutely understand that. I'm not trying to say we can have Westboro Baptist come into the residence halls or anything like that. That's not at all what we're talking about. But we think that the characterization of a zone on campus as the spot for free speech, not only are the restrictions that may be involved to a certain extent restricting, but just the idea that as we're college students, the idea that we can be taught that free speech can be limited to a certain zone is something that we shouldn't be instilling in college-age students as they go on into the world to become productive citizens of our society. So we understand that it's in place for a reason, but even the name of it itself is something that should be a cause for concern for every student when we can think about the concept of free speech as something that can be limited to a defined area.
Good. If you have any commentary on the topic.
I mean, I guess before the campaign platforms came out, I guess I never really thought of free speech at Iowa State being limited necessarily by the existence of a free speech zone. I just always thought of that as the place where, you could expect to see someone if they wanted to kind of loudspeaker their idea to reach more people than just say, people you interact with every day. So I guess I don't really have a strong reaction one way or the other, not having looked into maybe the legal issue of the reason why you would necessarily claim a free speech zone.
In response to that, I understand the whole legal whatever might be the case, but even just a change of the name itself while keeping the same types of rules that are in place for the area. Dan referred to it as kind of a loudspeaker area. Why can't we call it the loudspeaker zone, where you're allowed to talk through a loudspeaker? Just the name itself of the free speech zone should be a cause for concern for everybody who is here and plans to exercise their right to free speech at some point during their life.
Do you have anything else to say, Daniel?
I don't think I do.
Okay, really quick. He wants to know if he can take close-ups of you while you guys are.
I just don't want to distract you guys. That's why.
That's fine.
And just to clarify, for you guys who are listening along, the way we've decided to structure this is each candidate gets 2 minutes to answer the question that you ask or however it gets asked. And then each candidate will also get 1 minute for rebuttal if they choose to use that 1 minute time. So just for the information. But yeah, feel free to keep going.
This question will be for Mr. Radisky and Mr. Bauer. We've heard Mr. Hughes and Mrs. Clutcher talk about the executive initiative account and the executive payments. What's your guys' take on that?
Okay, so you want our take on the
Excuse
executive
me,
compensation.
the scholarship compensation.
So you get into kind of an interesting situation where, for instance, myself or Mr. Hughes may not necessarily need compensation to be able to fulfill our duties as advocates for students to the best of our ability. But at the same time, I see why they've been established in the past. I do think that that is an absurdly high number. $90,000 is a lot. I think this year's it came out to be just about $80,000 due to the in-state, out-of-state mix that we have. I think that while it is important not to misspend student fee money, it's also important that students have the best advocate and the best advocates for them in those positions. I did the numbers today, and it came out to be about $30,000 in the worst case if you were to give them just tuition, which would still put some of the burden on those students to get themselves through schooling at Iowa State. It wouldn't give them unnecessary, I guess, room and board, if you wanted to look at it that way, or unnecessary extra compensation. But I think that it would also free up the ability of some students who are not as, I guess, financially well off to still be the student's best advocate if they are indeed so. Because I'd rather have the best advocate regardless of what their financial situation is, not just the best advocate who can pay their way through school.
So just to clarify, you want to keep the scholarships for tuition but not room and board?
I think that that would probably be a wise way to move forward. I do agree that it is an excessive amount of money when it comes to 3 people and $90,000, but that's also, it moves the percentage of, if you estimate that GSB has a $2 million budget, it takes it from about 2.9% down to about 1.7%.
So is that what you plan to do if you become president?
I don't have direct control over what the scholarships are. It's actually in the bylaws, which requires legislative action. I could encourage it. I could implement that tomorrow, but it really just, it's one of those things where I would have to work with other people to find what would be the most responsible way of reducing that without putting undue burdens on the executive budgets.
Spencer, do you have anything to say?
Sure. So the concern about a student who may not be as well off or needs the opportunity to hold down a job and work their way through school is something that I am concerned about as well. And I've been working towards getting rid of these executive payments now ever since I started on GSB in 2010. And that was a concern that I heard when I first raised the issue. What about people who need to work their way through school? But then when I looked into it more, out of the 3 positions that get paid in GSB over the past 2 years, so 6 people total, 3 of those 6 have held another job outside of GSB while receiving the executive payments in GSB. It is certainly possible to hold a job outside of GSB while serving in a student organization executive position. For those of you in here who are very involved in student organizations, I'm sure that you know people, or you yourself, hold another job outside of that. So that argument doesn't hold a whole lot of water for me when I look around at people who work in who don't work in student organizations, but who hold high roles in student organizations, put in just as much time and effort as those of us involved in GSB, but are paying extra money and not receiving anything so that those in GSB can pay nothing, or even not pay tuition, whatever that might be. People in Dance Marathon, Visha, Sub, you name it, they're not getting full tuition scholarships, let alone tuition and board and fees and all-inclusive, anything like that. So that's where I'm coming from in response to the point regarding students that need to work their way through college.
Rebuttal?
Sure. I guess to talk a little bit about that, I do know that it has been done in the past, that executives, or I guess the people, very specific executives who have been getting these scholarships, have held jobs in the past. And having talked a lot with the office worker that GSB employs, her name is Mary, throughout my discussions with Mary, basically she agreed with me that basically it would be best if the executive did not have that obligation. Sure, it is possible to do, and sure that their jobs probably were done to the best of their ability or to an adequate extent. But I think that, to go with unburdening, you really want the executives to be unburdened with everything but representing students and doing their academic work, and that's it. I think that really you want the most powerful advocate you can have when you're going to talk about freezing tuition, decreasing tuition, working against tuition set aside that has been decided that we don't like. Any number of different things. I think that you would be better served by an executive who isn't distracted by as many things as possible.
Spencer? Anything else to say?
No, I don't.
Okay. Next question?
Can I clarify a question about the
Yes.
format? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's, the question is directed towards the candidate, and then there's a response and an additional response from your original
Yes.
answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 2 responses, 1 rebuttal, if you choose.
Next question? Nick?
Kind of shifting gears a little bit. I know a main concern of residence halls this semester and previous semesters has been overcrowding and use of dens and also communal areas and whatnot. I'm interested to hear both of your guys' platforms with regard to residence hall students and how you would work with the Department of Residence to maybe alleviate that pressure a little bit.
Daniel, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start on that one. I would certainly be interested in working with the Department of Residence to investigate the issue. I know it's been something that they've been talking about in our interactions with Pete England, the director of the Department of Residence. And that is why they are investing in some infrastructure in Freddie to support more students, to add beds. The Frederickson Court apartments are, I guess, the best return on their investment. They pay themselves off faster, which is why they haven't built more residence halls. And I guess to kind of talk about some of the things that Pete has talked about in my discussions with him about the issue is that he says the students who end up living in dens, for the most part, really like them. They don't really mind the dens, but obviously it does take away from the student experience that you don't have a common space necessarily in your residence hall house or in a set of houses that share a den. So it does bring an interesting quandary. I'm not particularly happy about the loss of dens to more space, but I think it's probably going to be an issue that continues because right now, as far as I've heard, the projected numbers again are going up for next year. So not something I'm particularly happy about, something that I'm willing to continue discussions on, but probably something where we'll end up with more apartment-style housing rather than residence halls.
Yeah, that's a concern that I held as well last year, living here in Friley and having the den being taken away by some students who were living there. And I understand when there's overcrowding, but at the same time there's a balance because the dens are not just a place for you to play ping pong or foosball or whatever, but they're a way for you to connect with the residents in your house as well. Earlier this month I was in a meeting with Dr. Tom Hill, the Vice President for Student Affairs. Kyrie was there as well, actually. And we talked about the balance between recruiting new students and continually improving the life on campus for current students, because that's a balance that continually needs to be struck. And with President Leaf talking about his goal for 35,000 students on this campus, which I can see some of you have concerns about, I do as well. I don't know, right now we're about 31,000. That's quite a few more people to have walking around here. But we need to be sure that we are focused on the student experience for those of us who are already here, instead of focusing solely on recruiting new students. And I'm not saying that's what's happening at the moment, but that always needs to be in the back of our minds. So the concern that you have is absolutely one that I share, and I'm sure Hillary does as well. And that's where we all we can do is talk with Pete England, Director of Residence, and let him know that that's where we are and that's where most students are. And I'm sure that he's going to work in the best interest of students as well.
Do you have a rebuttal, Daniel?
I mean, I don't think that we're on opposing sides necessarily in this issue. I
Okay,
think we're
well,
both-
I just want to...
No, that's fine.
We're on the same page.
I would say that our positions on this is probably going to be very similar.
Okay. Stephanie?
Kind of in response to that, because the reality is we're going to be still using DINs for probably the next year, if not a couple of years. And so the big concern is the common spaces. Have you all thought about how the rest of campus can react to that with common spaces and maybe how the Department of Residence can outreach? Because we can't obviously build as quickly as our numbers are growing, but are there ways to do that elsewhere?
Can you clarify your question a little bit?
Yep. We cannot build quickly enough to accommodate the common space issue, because that's the biggest issue with not having DINs. Have you all thought about how other places on campus can outreach, or we can partner with them to accommodate that common space issue?
Do you understand the question?
Yeah.
Okay, Spencer, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I think we can talk about this a little bit, but I think that that's kind of something that has started to happen, at least with the new development on campus, that people are realizing that these new buildings, new additions, are places not just for academics or whatnot, but for student life as a whole. I just heard about the addition that's going on to Curtis Hall, which will be up soon, and that they're building a cafe there, which not only has places for people to buy food, but they have a student-only conference room included in that, and they have a number of student tables with a bunch of outlets all over the place. So it's an area where people can not just go to buy coffee, buy a sandwich, but can meet as a group of from a class, or meet as a group from a residence hall floor, and just have, if they want to have a house meeting at Curtis Hall. I understand it's not necessarily a great location, but that's just one example. So that's one thing that's going on right now.
Yeah, and there are multiple locations on campus that I think students are constantly discovering. And there's buildings on the north side of campus that maybe you've never gone to until you're sophomore or junior, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I can meet with fellow students here and study here, and this is a good space. And so just on that common space term, I just say, our construction projects on campus are working on that, but also I think it's up to students to find those locations on campus and use them, because there are definitely places out there.
I think really what the biggest issue is not that we don't have space at Iowa State, it's maybe that we don't have the most convenient space. Unfortunately, with Iowa State and being a beautiful campus as it is, there are certain places that we can't build. And so I think that the situation is going to be working to make the space that we have either suit our needs, or to find ways to make the spaces that we have more convenient to students.
I think to kind of go into, I think you asked about how the DOR can work with students to kind of point these out, and I think just illustrating what Hillary had to say about that is that we have these places that not everybody knows about. So I think a lot of it is a knowledge problem, and so if the DOR can work to help educate people about these different places that are on campus. I love discovering a new place that I've never been. If somebody told me about it, it'd be a lot easier for me to do that. So I think that would be a great first step to take, is to help identify these areas and then tell students about them, to help kind of facilitate that.
Anything else to say on that?
That's it.
Okay.
Hi there. Hughes Clutcher touched on this, but I want to get an answer from both sides. We talked somewhat about the Iowa State experience and the administration's desire to see lots more students on campus, their ideal size. What is each ticket's ideal size, or what is your student experience led you to believe would be good size for Iowa State, and how would that affect the current experience for students?
Okay, so your question is about...
It's a pretty direct question. What do you believe from your experiences in student government, from your conversations with upper administration, would be, in your personal view, an ideal size for the student body?
Am I beginning this one?
Yeah.
Well, to talk about what my ideal size is, I think is kind of an interesting question, because some of the things that arise from overcrowding is actually that we're having kind of interesting trends going on in residence living. I know, having talked to Pete, Pete's saying that he's having more people stay in residence halls longer and not moving out into the community, which there are enough places to live in Ames, but they're not all as close as they are when you live on campus. So that might be some of it. I don't necessarily know that I honestly have a number that would say, well, this is the best student experience. Not having experienced them all, I would say that we're at a pretty decent size right now. Based on what I've experienced, I can't say I've had a bad student experience. Would we be able to serve students better if we had fewer? Well, probably, but we'd also have less money to do it with. It's one of those relationships that it's a complex enough problem that even though, I've had two and a half years of student government experience and interacting with the administration of Iowa State, it's not just as easy as saying, well, this is the magic number, because there are a lot of different factors that go into it. When it comes to residence halls having dens taken away, well, then obviously we're over that number. But that's also due to a trend that people are staying in residence halls longer. Whereas it used to be you stayed in for a year, 2 years, and then you moved out to an apartment. Maybe people are staying 3 years now and then moving out to an apartment. I don't know what the trend is, but that would be a thing for Pete Englund to be a very good expert on, what's specific to the residence halls. Classroom sizes, obviously if we don't have the classrooms to have students in the classes for, we have too many students. Or we need to build more classrooms and have more professors and do all of those things, but again, that's a function of money. So I think from my experiences and from what I've heard, us growing any further will probably put a big hurdle in our way when it comes to student experiences. But I think we're pretty close to the ideal, I guess, of what I can control right now.
So like so many things in this world, it all kind of comes down to money. And as you know, Kyrie, the meeting that we had with Dr. Tom Hill was about how the student affairs budget would be allocated. And the way that you can kind of determine where you stand on student body enrollment size is how you prioritize recruiting new students against the student life for students currently on campus, like I touched on earlier. The more money that you put towards recruitment, the more that you hope and expect your numbers to grow. And that's something, the way that I see it at this point is new students here, obviously new students are a good thing. We want new students to be coming in. We don't want the freshman class to be zero. But we need to make sure that the student experience for people on campus now is not hurt by the increase in enrollment. We talked about students living in dens earlier. Does that negatively impact your student experience? It might inconvenience you to a certain extent, but does it have a serious negative impact? That's something that absolutely needs to be considered when we talk about putting money towards recruitment as opposed to spending that money on things that will benefit student life for those of us who are already here. So I think at this point, we understand that the university is getting a little big for its britches, so to speak. But there are opportunities for expansion that just take time. And so I think at this point, the money is better spent on improving student life for those of us currently here and focusing on the expansion to make room down the line for the increase in enrollment that we don't have at this point.
Do you have anything else to say?
I think, kind of in summary to what we both said, I think the easiest way to characterize what the university is going through now is growing pains when it comes to having enough infrastructure to handle the student experience and to give the students, the experience that students 4 years ago had coming through. Obviously, we have some better things than we used to, but we also have more people trying to use them. So I think that, there will come a point where Iowa State will probably cease to have record enrollment years, and we'll probably stabilize our enrollment. And after we stabilize enrollment, it'll take a couple of years, but we'll probably reach the point where the student experience will come back to what people recognize as the Iowa State student experience, which is what the administration tries to sell. Iowa State is really, really a neat place, and the administration likes to do things for students, frankly. You tell Dr. Hill any idea you have that will improve student life, and he will probably be extremely excited about it. The administration at Iowa State is great like that. So that's just really kind of the way I would kind of paint the picture.
Sounds like you have any last. Okay. Next question. Anybody? I can't see over there. What? What's your question?
Yes, I have another concern about for students' life, which is textbooks. I don't know if you guys have thought about if there's any subsidies for any textbooks, because Hillary, you're an engineering student, so you do know how engineers' textbooks are, but yeah, so any comments on those?
Sounds like you want to start.
Yeah, Dan mentioned this when they were talking about their projects, and I mentioned it when I was talking about how we want to make students unburdened. So it's working to get some of those e-textbooks or more textbooks in the library accessible to students so that you don't have to buy textbooks maybe for your 100, 200 level courses that so many students are enrolled in, but you would still have to buy them for the upper level courses, but just eliminating some of that cost up front during your first few years here at Iowa State University. I think subsidies is a little bit of a far-fetched idea, but I think finding those classes that a lot of students enroll in throughout their time here and getting that textbook option available, e-textbook or PDF file you can print off from the library, I think that's really where we need to start, and I think that'll be the best step.
Well,
Yeah.
would you like to say anything?
Sure. I think that, I guess if it gets to the government of the student body giving subsidies for textbooks, we probably shouldn't charge the fee in the first place, because really our money in GSP comes from students. So I think that at that point, we would probably just not charge as much money. If that was what we were going to do, would be a more efficient way of just giving you back what you have. But when we come to e-textbooks, I think that there are a couple different places on campus that are already investigating this. There's a pilot study done through ITS, IT solutions on campus. And also the library is looking into currently going out for bids on looking to get 100 and 200 level textbooks. So for the big classes that you'll take because they're general education and not because they're for your major. I know a lot of students, at least ones that I've talked to, have said that they buy a lot of their later textbooks because they know that they'll be important for their majors. I know I usually buy and keep my textbooks because I'm going to be referring to them. But it really just kind of depends on the major and what the situation is like. And so I guess input on those situations, or on those specific textbooks, textbooks that we could be looking at providing e-versions for through a program that would be probably supported by the government and the student body, would certainly be something we'd go out for input from the students as well, as targeting the classes that are really high volume. So I guess I hope that it addresses your question.
Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, Max, we know that it's really expensive to go to school even outside of just paying tuition. So the textbooks idea is something that absolutely should be explored and is being explored, like Dan talked about. Something to absolutely look at. And even beyond that, like we talked about earlier with supplemental instruction materials like clickers and Top Hat Monocle, down the line, if this isn't taken care of now, there will be places where students will have to pay for two separate items that do the exact same thing, but they still make you buy both of them. So that's another thing that Hillary and I are looking into, saving this, changing that now before it becomes a problem, so that down the line students will only have to have one of the two things that does the exact same thing. So that's just another way to look at keeping the cost of education, the hidden cost, so to speak, as low as possible.
Daniel, do you have any final words? Okay, any more questions? Yes, Dahlia.
I don't know if they've already asked, but how do both of you feel about transparency within GSB concerning the spending? I know that's been a little bit of a hot issue lately.
Okay, Spencer.
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. We did talk about that a little bit earlier as to what Hillary and I plan to do with the transparency and spending. I talked about the GSB website and how the internet is really the #1 way that people look for information at all anymore. If you have a question about anything, you go to Google, right? Or Bing, I guess, if that's your thing, whatever. But the internet is the way people get information. And so as far as expenditures go, we have a plan that every time we spend GSB money, which is your money, activity fee dollars, we post that on the front page of the GSB website. So it's just a thing you can scroll through and see. This is where $400 went. This is where $5,000 went. You can see where the money went, what it's being spent for, and who it was allocated towards. And then if you have any concerns about anything that happened, you can contact your senator, your president, whoever you might want to contact. And additionally, with the future potential expenditures, which go through Senate bills, through our agendas and things like that, those also need to be posted on our website so people can look and see what's going to happen before it actually happens. And so that way their opinion and their influence will actually matter. Like I said before, the internet presence that we have through GSB is remarkably poor for it being 2013. And that's something that we absolutely need to change.
And on that, I would like to add that over this last year, Spencer has worked to get a Twitter account set up for GSB, so you can actually follow a live Twitter feed for what's going on in our meetings if you're interested in that at all. So it's just another way that we're reaching out to students.
Daniel?
Yeah, to kind of add to what they've said about using the website further, Zach and I feel that that's a very important issue when it comes to making sure that students know what's happening with their fee money. Because GSB does get to, I guess, make appropriate use of the $35.35 activity fee, because not only is where your money goes a little bit opaque, but the process is a very, very complex one, to be completely honest with you. And I know Zach and I would really like to see a good hard look at the system that we have set up and see if there's not a better way to fund student organizations, see if there's not a better way to determine where to allocate student fee money, because frankly our current way is a little bit hard to understand. And if it's hard for us to understand, having been in GSB, I've served on the finance committee for 2 years, and that kind of gives me the insight I have. but not every one of the 31,000 students that we have does that. So I think that it's really something that we're definitely going to work towards, other than just using the website, other than just empowering senators to understand it. I think we have to work towards being more transparent, period.
Spencer, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, it really doesn't seem like we are disagreeing a whole lot on this. I think kind of the focus might be where the focus of the intent might be where our disagreement may lie, in that we totally agree that the transparency is important, and you're not going to hear any of us arguing with that. But we think that the best way to make things more transparent is to have the information available for people to see it in the place that they're most likely to see it, as well as other avenues. But we're really going to focus hard on getting everything that we possibly can online, because we know that's where people consume information, and that's where it'll be most helpful to have the information for you accessible at your fingertips whenever you choose to access it.
And do you have anything else? No? Okay. Cooper.
All right, while we're talking about money here, I know there's been a lot that's been done to make in-state tuition and costs for in-state Iowa students cheaper. What are your plans for making the out-of-state bill a lot cheaper? Because I know I'm paying like $28,000, something like that right now to come here.
I think it's.
I think so, yeah.
Sorry, I haven't been keeping it down. Well, to address that, first of all, I definitely agree with you that I think that there needs to be at least a very, very clear effort on the behalf of the government and the student body to raise that concern. Because I know that this year we got the tuition freeze for the in-state students, and the out-of-state students, I believe it was 4%, something like that. I believe it was 4%, if I'm not mistaken. My numbers could be wrong. I could have lost it somewhere in the finance notes that I've been going through. But I think that it's one of those very hard things to sell. It's not necessarily that we'll be successful, but we've certainly got to try, because there are students who pay more in 1 year than I pay in 2, and that's a little bit ridiculous. We're all Iowa State students at some point. We can't forget a large portion of the Iowa State students when we're advocating about it. So certainly, whether that's working to get a tuition freeze across the board, which would be a very hard sell, I'm sure. I would love to see it happen. I would love to see out-of-state tuition go down, because you guys are paying a ton, to be completely honest. But the money's got to come from somewhere. So I think it's going to be really working through all of our options on that front. Certainly, it's not a forgotten issue. Student debt, student tuition, all of those things are certainly something that Zach and I are concerned about. But we know that we've got to make the connections and really do a good job of advocating for not only the in-state students, but the out-of-state students when it comes to the cost of education.
Cooper, I totally feel your pain. I just want to say that. And Spencer and I really, we want to work with the Board of Regents to keep the tuition freeze for Iowa students, because when you look at why this institution was established, it was a land-grant institution for students in Iowa. So that's one thing why we do have trouble with the out-of-state discussion, because of the whole mission and the reason that Iowa State was established. And Iowa State has grown to be completely a respected university in so many avenues. I mean, that's why I'm here. That's probably why you're here. And, continuing to just work with the Board of Regents to minimize that cost. And another thing that Spencer and I are doing with our campaign to make it all about you is adding a unique aspect. And with that, we want to work there's a place where students can ask questions on campus. Can you remind me of that name?
Student Answer Center.
Yeah, so the Student Answers Center, and we want to set that up so that you can either text or maybe tweet questions to that. And so I'm thinking, as an out-of-state student, maybe you want to find a scholarship to apply for and you're struggling with it. Text that Answer Center, and they can say, hey, here's 5 scholarships that are due 2 weeks from now. And as an out-of-state student, there's an opportunity for you, that's easy avenue for you to access that. I mean, as an out-of-state student, I've spent so many hours applying for scholarships, and I'm sure you've done the same thing. And right now, that's what we have. So how can we make those scholarships more well-known to students until we can work with the Board of Regents to either freeze, decrease that cost? But I think that's going to be the best way that Spencer and I can help with that for students, is the Answers Center, and then letting students know. Ask them about scholarships. They'll help you out. So thanks, Cooper.
Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I guess on the topic of scholarships, one of the things that Zach and I can do, I guess, if you're having problems finding the scholarships that you're looking for, I know the Office of Financial Aid has a website and has a catalog of all the ones they know of. I don't know whether you find their website useful or not useful. I've found it both ways sometimes, depending on if I was looking for a specific scholarship or trying to narrow it down or whatever the case might be. If there are ways that you can improve services to students on campus that don't directly go with us going and fighting with the Board of Regents for the tuition freeze, which we'll do anyways, but I think that if there's a way to improve something on campus, such as say the financial aid website or the way that we present financial aid, if there's a clearer way to make it, then let's do so. I think some of the other things on campus that we don't do a good enough job of spotlighting is some of the services that we fund for students. So whether that be like financial aid, or not financial aid counseling, student debt counseling on campus. Because I know that out-of-state students do incur, even in-state students incur debt. But I think that's a service that we're funding currently through GSB that we need to do a good job of sharing about, because that's where student fee money is going.
No.
Related follow-up. What are you prepared to cut, given that you're both proposing a tuition freeze? Give you a little bit of history. 10 years ago, the tuition increase was about 18% in 2002. Since then, it's gone up and peaked again in fiscal year 2011, and it's continued to go down. But the fact of the matter is, Iowa State is understaffed as far as the professors. They are underpaid, and we are out of space, renovations, etc. So what are you prepared to cut in order to keep this tuition freeze, the resident freeze, the fees, everything? What are you prepared to cut?
Let me tell you my ideal answer first, because as far as where we stand, Hillary and I stand with the tuition freeze, we would love to see the $31 million that the Regents asked for allocated by the legislature, which would pretty much backfill all the money that's being lost from the tuition freeze. That would be ideal. And we think that it's likely we'll get some money because the governor has agreed with his opposing party that some increase should come. So there's going to be some money there. But in the ideal world, that's what would happen. We'd get all the money and everybody would have all the money they wanted. Nobody would be living in dens, anything like that. That'd be perfect. But at the same time, we understand that that's not the world we live in. So we need to look, there's going to be some hard decisions that might need to be made if there will be not all the money we want. And so we have to balance, again, like I talked about earlier, there has to be a balance between how much students are paying and the type of quality that they get for their education. And that's a balance that always needs to be discussed. Does the university need more money to maintain or improve student life? If that is a yes, a hard yes, without any possibility of getting more money from the legislature, then that's something that needs to be seriously considered.